William Oliver Taylor didn't expect to see Major Reno passing whiskey mid-charge at Little Bighorn. The Sioux and Cheyenne, though, were ready, turning Reno's sloppy attack into a masterclass of defiance. It's like watching a bad TikTok challenge crash and burn, except the stakes were survival. Taylor's account rips the myth wide open. Custer's defeat wasn't the only disaster. Reno's booze-fueled blunder lit the fuse. From serene camps to screaming retreats, this is Little Bighorn through a survivor's unflinching gaze. The 24th of June, 1876, and the 7th Cavalry slogged through Montana's dust, boots and hooves pounding like a team stuck on a brutal road march. W.O. Taylor called it mighty tiresome, every step a grind, like scrolling an endless doom feed. Scouts halted the column repeatedly, fanning out to probe the valley for Sioux or Cheyenne camps. Each pause stretched nerves, the men squinting into the haze, sensing trouble but lacking intel. No one tweeted their position, but the tension was louder than any notification. By dusk, they set up a bivouac near a river, a 200-yard plateau flanked by a steep bluff. Horses were fed and brushed, men choked down hardtack and coffee, then spread blankets on the dirt. Custer, always picky about campsites, chose this spot for its defensible layout, not its views. Taylor noted it was practical, with a brook for water and open ground for pickets. The men moved fast, setting up tents and posting guards, like a crew rushing to meet a deadline before a storm hits. Nobody lingered to admire the scenery. Taylor's troop camped close to Custer's headquarters, near enough to spot the general outside his tent, alone, staring like he'd just read a bad mission brief. Taylor caught a flicker of unease on Custer's face, a rare glitch in the man's usual swagger. Was he replaying Fort Lincoln's safety, or sensing the Sioux closing in? No words were exchanged, just Taylor's sharp eyes clocking the moment. It was a snapshot of doubt, like a CEO second-guessing a merger right before the crash. Officers huddled at Custer's tent for orders, their murmurs sharp and clipped, like a strategy call before a high-stakes op. Later, younger lieutenants gathered near the bivouac, breaking into song, Annie Laurie, little footsteps soft and gentle, goodbye at the door. Then, oddly, doxology, praise God from whom all blessings flow. Taylor smirked hymns on an Indian trail. It was like soldiers dropping a playlist of church covers before a firefight. Maybe it was a prayer, or maybe they felt death's group chat pinging. They ended with, for he's a jolly good fellow, a toast to no one in particular. Silence hit, broken only by horses shifting or nightbirds calling. Taylor didn't know that just a week prior, Crazy Horse had mauled General Crook's forces a few miles up this stream. The ground they camped on was already blood-soaked, a fact no scout reported. Nobody foresaw that in a month, Sioux and Cheyenne would return, locking down the region like a no-go zone. Lame deer would soon die fighting for these hunting grounds. The camp's calm was a tactical pause, like a server lag before the game crashes hard. Rest was cut short at 10 p.m. on the 25th of June when orders barked, saddle up. The men groaned, dragging gear like coders pulling an all-nighter. The night march stretched 10 miles, climbing the north fork of the Rosebud toward the divide with the Little Bighorn. Scouts led, probing for enemy camps under starlight. By 2 a.m., they stopped, waiting for recon reports. Some unsaddled horses and crashed on the ground, snoring through the chill. Others stood watch, eyes scanning the dark, their rifles closer than their thoughts. Dawn brought coffee brewed with water that tasted like a bad decision. The sleepless clustered in small groups, muttering about the fight ahead. Sioux, Cheyenne, how many? No one had hard numbers, like planning an assault with a blank map. Taylor listened, catching the mix of bravado and jitters. Scouts were still out, chasing smoke or tracks. The men sipped their sludge, checking gear, unaware they were hours from a battle that would burn their names into history's algorithm. Custer's plan relied on speed and surprise, but the march had dulled the men's edge. Taylor's account, written later, cuts through the fog. The 7th Cavalry was tired, overconfident, and blind to the Sioux and Cheyenne's strength. The bivouac setup showed Custer's tactical open ground for defense, water nearby, but it wasn't enough. The songs, the general's brooding, the scouts' delays, all hints of a plan fraying. Taylor's eyes caught every crack, from the march's grind to the camp's false calm. The Sioux and Cheyenne, meanwhile, weren't sleeping. Leaders like Crazy Horse and Gall were already coordinating, their camps a hive of strategy. Taylor's later writings reveal a cavalry outmaneuvered before the first shot. The night march was a gamble, splitting forces across a divide between rivers and fates. Custer's orders were clear: find the enemy, hit fast, but the 7th was walking into a trap they couldn't Google their way out of. This night was the last breath before Little Bighorn's chaos. Taylor's gaze, unflinching and precise, logged the details: the rushed camp, the odd hymns, Custer's unease. The 7th Cavalry wasn't just marching, they were stumbling toward a reckoning. Tomorrow, Reno's whiskey-fueled charge would ignite the disaster, and Taylor would see it all. His survival a footnote in a battle that rewrote the West's code. Dawn broke over the Little Bighorn divide, and Wu Taylor's eyes tracked General Custer galloping back, bareback, maybe bareheaded, like a man who'd seen a bad omen and didn't care to share. Before 8 a.m. on the 25th of June, 1876, Custer relayed the scouts' report: smoke rising from a Sioux and Cheyenne village, pony herds grazing nearby, no time for coffee breaks. He ordered the 7th Cavalry to move immediately, marching up the dusty divide between the Rosebud and Little Bighorn rivers. The plan was to stay sharp, hit fast, and catch the enemy off guard. Classic Custer, betting the house on a single hand. By 10:30 a.m., the column halted in a ravine, ordered to stay hidden and keep quiet. Custer's initial plan was to wait until morning, let the men rest, and strike at dawn. But the Sioux and Cheyenne had already clocked them, probably from a scout's careless silhouette against the ridge. Waiting was off the table. Custer, never one to backpedal, decided to act now, like a streamer jumping into a game without checking the server status. The 7th Cavalry, tired from the night march, braced for action, their rifles cleaned but their nerves frayed. Just before noon, Custer split the regiment into battalions, a move as bold as it was reckless. Major Reno's vanguard got troops M, A, and G: Captain French, Captain Moylan, Lieutenants DeRudo, McIntosh, and Wallace, leading a mix of 150 men. 30 Indian scouts, guided by Lieutenants Varnum and Hare, joined them, along with interpreters Isaiah Dorman and Frank Gerard, plus 3 white scouts: Charlie Reynolds, George Herendeen, and a man called Barron. 2 surgeons, Dr. DeWolf and Dr. Porter, tagged along, ready for the inevitable. Captain Benteen took troops D, H, and K, about 125 men, veering left. Custer kept troops C, E, F, J, A, and L, swinging right. Captain McDougal's B Troop guarded the pack train, trailing like a slow-loading web page. Reno's battalion marched down a dry valley, following an Indian trail along what they called Benteen's or Sundance Creek, a stream that usually fed the Little Bighorn but was now a dusty ditch. They passed a smoldering teepee, torched by their own scouts, housing the body of a warrior later identified as Old She-Bear's brother, killed fighting Crook on the Rosebud 8 days earlier. Taylor saw no Sioux or Cheyenne, though rumors of sightings buzzed like static. The men kept moving, rifles at the ready, scanning for threats in the empty hills. As they neared the Little Bighorn River, Reno got orders to pick up the pace. The river, 50 to 70 feet wide and icy cold, cut through the valley, its banks thick with brush. Men and horses drank greedily, Taylor scooping water with his hat, the last he'd taste for over 24 hours. They crossed, pushed through the undergrowth, and hit open grassland. Orders came to dismount and tighten saddle girths, a quick reset before the storm. In 10 minutes, they were moving again, down a narrow valley, the river's wooded bends on their right, low foothills on their left where pony herds grazed. Mounted figures darted in the distance, herding horses, signaling. The enemy was close. The pace shifted from brisk walk to trot, the air crackling with the first ping of bullets. Reno shouted, "Charge!" and some troopers cheered, mimicking the Sioux and Cheyenne war whoops. Reno snapped, "Stop that noise!" and bellowed, "Charge!" again, his voice sharp but unsteady. Taylor, riding nearby, caught a surreal sight. Reno and Lieutenant Hodson galloping side by side, Reno passing a quart-sized bottle, half full of amber liquid. Whiskey, Taylor figured, noting how later Cheyenne accounts described the soldiers as acting drunk. One warrior even found liquor on a dead trooper's body. It was like watching a frat party crash a war zone, with Reno leading the charge straight into a buzzsaw. Taylor, slotted as the fourth man in his unit, drew the short straw, leading 3 horses into battle, tethered to his own, keeping him out of the fight. He tried swapping with Cornelius Crowley, the third man, but Crowley, already showing signs of mental strain, refused. The battle stress would later push Crowley over the edge, watched closely by the horse guard. Taylor gritted his teeth, stuck with his role, guiding skittish mounts as the troop barreled toward the Indian village. The absurdity wasn't lost on him. 150 men charging a camp with 1,800 teepees and at least 2,500 Sioux and Cheyenne warriors. The terrain turned rough, broken ground leading to the village's edge. Taylor scanned his comrades facescent, pale, not entirely from fear but from the weight of what was coming. Reno's order to halt and fight on foot snapped through the ranks. Every fourth man stayed mounted, holding the reins of 3 others' horses, while the rest, dismounted, tied their mounts together, and handed control to the horse holders. Taylor, still tethered to his extra mounts, watched Lieutenant Hare lead the lead horses into a wooded patch for cover. It was a smart move, but it wouldn't hold for long. The fight erupted fast. Bullets whistled through the underbrush, a chaotic hum of lead and shouts. Taylor estimated they were in the woods for 15, maybe 20 minutes, though time blurred in the chaos. He didn't see Reno or hear any clear orders, just the crack of gunfire and the rustle of leaves. The Sioux and Cheyenne weren't just defending, they were counterattacking, their numbers overwhelming. Suddenly, the forward line of troopers came crashing back, scrambling for their horses, lost in the thick brush and shifting positions. It was like a team wiping in a raid, no respawn in sight. Reno's plan, if it could be called that, was unraveling. The battalion's 150 men were a speck against the village's sprawl, its warriors coordinated and relentless. Taylor's role as horse holder kept him out of the direct fire, but it didn't shield him from the reality. This was no skirmish. The Sioux and Cheyenne, led by unseen tacticians like Crazy Horse or Gall, were turning the valley into a kill box. The initial charge, fueled by whiskey and bravado, had collided with a force that didn't just fight back, it dominated. The woods became a trap, the air thick with the zip of bullets and the shouts of warriors. Taylor's eyes darted, catching the chaos as men struggled to regroup. Reno's absence in the thick of it was glaring. No orders, no leadership, just a bottle passed in the heat of a doomed charge. The 7th Cavalry's playbook was burning, and Taylor, stuck holding horses, saw it all go wrong. The Little Bighorn wasn't just a battle, it was a masterclass in how to lose spectacularly. The woods near the Little Bighorn River were a kill box, and whoa, Taylor, stuck holding 3 extra horses, heard the desperate cry, "We must get out of here, quick!" Major Reno's charge had collapsed into a frantic retreat, like a team bailing on a botched mission with no respawn. Bullets zipped through the underbrush, Sioux and Cheyenne war cries echoing like a swarm of angry notifications. 2 troopers from Taylor's 4-man squad found him, snatched their mounts, and bolted, leaving him with Cornelius Crowley's horse. Where was Crowley? Taylor scanned the chaos, spotting him sprinting through the trees, shouting, "Where's my horse? Where's my horse?" Taylor flung the reins at him, swung onto his own mount, Steamboat, and followed the fleeing cavalry, the air thick with panic and gunfire. The retreat was a mess, like a server crash mid-battle, no one sure who was in charge. Taylor dismounted and remounted twice, not because of orders but because he saw others do it, assuming some command had been given. Reno's whiskey-fueled plan was in tatters, and the Sioux and Cheyenne weren't just defending, they were orchestrating a rout. Taylor glanced left and back, his heart lurching as he saw mounted warriors charging through the woods, paralleling the cavalry's path. At first, he mistook them for his own Indian scouts, a split-second error that could have cost him. These were enemies, stripped to breechclouts, feathers in their hair, whips swinging from wrists, muskets clutched. Their ponies moved with precision, like a coordinated strike team. One warrior stood out, his war bonnet a striking cascade of long feathers encircling his head and trailing down his back, a leader radiating command. Was it Gaul? Black Moon? Taylor raised his pistol, finger twitching, but dense trees and his mediocre aim stopped him. He wasn't about to waste a shot and draw attention. His saddle snagged a branch, nearly tearing free, throwing him off balance as he pushed toward open ground. The Sioux and Cheyenne, at least 2,500 strong, weren't just pursuing, they were outflanking, their ponies at full gallop, cutting off the ford where Reno's battalion had crossed the Little Bighorn. It was like watching a pro team exploit every glitch in the cavalry's playbook. Taylor burst onto the grassland, a short dash from the woods, and the full scale of the disaster hit him. A vast and ever-increasing throng of Sioux warriors formed a thick red line, growing denser by the minute, their war cries a wall of sound. Bullets flew from their flank, some firing from the far side of their ponies, a tactic as terrifying as it was effective. To his left, troopers raced eastward toward the bluffs, aiming for high ground in a desperate bid to survive. The situation was dire, like a game where the enemy had already hacked the map. Every soldier stretched out their right arm, firing pistols at the screaming warriors. But the shots felt more like defiance than strategy. Taylor, never trained to shoot from horseback, took a shaky shot at a Sioux rider opposite him. His six-shot revolver was down to one bullet, which he surveyed a grim backup plan if capture or a mortal wound loomed. The ground turned treacherous, a prairie dog village riddled with holes and mounds that threatened to trip Steamboat. Taylor gripped the reins, praying the horse wouldn't stumble. They reached an old riverbed, 3 to 4 feet below the plain, and Steamboat leapt the bank. In the jolt, Taylor's pistol slipped from his sweaty hand, clattering to the dirt. He glanced back but didn't. Stop warriors were closing in, intent on driving the cavalry into the river like cattle. The Little Bighorn was a nightmare, a writhing mass of men and horses thrashing in blood-tinted water. Taylor heard Lieutenant Hodson's agonized cries, wounded in the chaos. He veered right, dodging the tangle, and urged Steamboat through the icy current. On the far bank, the horse staggered, broken-winded, and marked for retirement, a reject mount given to Taylor due to shortages. Bullets whizzed as he dismounted, trying to drag Steamboat up the steep bluff. The horse refused, even when prodded with Taylor's rifle butt. Furious, he kicked it, shouldered his weapon, and started climbing on foot, the ridge narrowing like a funnel, deep ravines on both sides. A third of the way up, Myers, nicknamed Tinkerbill, caught up, a dismounted trooper panting beside him. They trudged together for moments before Myers pitched forward, a bullet tearing through his head between eye and ear, dead before he hit the ground. Taylor froze, certain he was next. Instead of climbing straight, he veered right into a ravine, then left, zigzagging to dodge snipers. Near the top, Frank Neely, an old comrade, overtook him, riding one horse and leading another. Neely tossed Taylor the reins of Old Dutch, a nag barely better than Steamboat. Taylor mounted and reached Reno's battered battalion on the bluff, where a few more survivors straggled in. Their escape felt like a miracle, like spawning at the last checkpoint in a brutal game. At the bluff's crest, the Sioux and Cheyenne's gunfire stopped, as if they'd pivoted to a bigger target. Major Reno paced, hatless, a red handkerchief tied around his head, looking like a man who'd bet everything and lost. Exhausted troopers collapsed, officers swapping half-heard reports of the valley's slaughter. Around 2:30 p.m., Captain Benteen rode in with troops H, D, and K sent to link with Custer. Soon after, Captain McDougal arrived with B Troop and the pack train, Sergeant David C. Keepe relaying Custer's last orders. Boston Custer, the general's brother and a civilian quartermaster, had rejoined the fight after swapping horses. His body would later be found near his brother's, a tragic footnote in the day's carnage. For over 2 hours, Reno's men sat idle, catching their breath but doing nothing, like a squad stuck in a loading screen. Sergeants counted heads, tallying the dead, wounded, and missing, plus lost garifuls, saddles, pride. Distant gunfire rolled from Custer's direction, a faint crackle of doom, yet no one budged. "Why don't we move?" Some grumbled, but Reno's 3 troops, shell-shocked from the valley, stayed put. The wounded could still ride, and every officer knew Custer was fighting nearby. The Sioux and Cheyenne's abrupt retreat hinted they were hitting another target, likely Custer's command, now cut off and bleeding out. By 4:30 p.m., 12 stragglers climbed the bluff, survivors who'd hidden in the woods after being unhorsed. Originally 14, 2 refused to flee in daylight, only to be found and killed by warriors. The group included Scout George Herendine, 6 from G Troop, 3 from M, and 2 from A. They'd fended off 5 Sioux on their trek, taking no losses. An A Troop soldier found Taylor's horse grazing calmly, assuming Taylor was dead. None of his gear was missing, despite the horse lingering near enemy lines for hours. Another group, Lieutenant DeRudio, Private Tom O'Neill, Frank Gerard, and William Jackson, reached safety the next night, raising the count of those left behind to 18. Around 5 p.m., orders came to mount and ride toward Custer's position. A short push along the bluffs led to a ridge overlooking his battlefield. Sioux and Cheyenne warriors swarmed, some close enough to draw beads. Captain Weir's vanguard took fire, forcing a retreat to their earlier spot. By 6 p.m., the enemy had them surrounded, unleashing a relentless assault. The pack train, wounded, and horses were tucked into a hollow between 2 ridges. Troopers hugged the slopes, lying flat as snipers peppered them from the east. Taylor was stunned. The Sioux, fresh from annihilating Custer's 5 troops, didn't press harder. Gunfire eased by 9 p.m., with only 3 dead and a few wounded, per Captain Godfrey. As darkness fell, scouts sent to find Custer returned fast, reporting the area thick with warriors. A trumpeter blew signals from a high point, hoping to guide Custer's men. The last call, taps, echoed, and Taylor wondered if it was chance or a grim omen. Grief settled like dust, the sound fading into the night. Shallow graves held fresh-buried comrades, while more lay unburied below, scattered along the slopes and woods. Over 200 men of the regiment, strewn farther out, were still unaccounted for, their fate a silent scream in the dark. Darkness settled over the bluffs above the Little Bighorn, and the gunfire from the Sioux and Cheyenne finally stopped, like a server going offline after a brutal match. W.O. Taylor, still reeling from the day's chaos, watched soldiers move freely for the first time in hours, their silhouettes darting in the moonlight as they whispered about what came next. With a troop sergeant wounded, a grizzled German, Sergeant Feller, took charge, barking orders like a coach rallying a battered team. Taylor approached him, voice low, and asked, "What are we doing? Staying here all night or trying to move?" Major Reno, pacing nearby, overheard and snapped, "I'd like to know how in hell we're going to move away." His tone carried the weight of a man who'd seen his plan whiskey bottle and all crumble into dust. Taylor didn't back down. He pressed Feller, saying if they were staying, they needed a barricade. The Sioux and Cheyenne would hit them at dawn, no question, like a follow-up raid after a wipe. Reno, catching the idea, jumped in. "Yes, Sergeant, that's a good idea. Set all the men you can to work right away." Feller rounded up the troops, ordering them to gather anything usable: boxes of hardtack, pack saddles, slabs of bacon, even dead mules and horse stow, build a barricade across the lower end of the depression. The work was sluggish, like pulling teeth from a demoralized squad. Many soldiers dragged their feet, and officers showed even less enthusiasm, as if they expected Custer to ride in like a glitchy NPC with a last-second save. Taylor noted the apathy, a stark contrast to the urgency of survival. The barricade, crude but solid, would prove a lifeline, blocking the only clear path for a mounted Sioux charge. Without it, Taylor later wrote, the warriors would have rode over us as they did over Custer's men. Taylor saw no sign that troops M, K, B, or D built similar defenses, and H Troop definitely didn't bother. The oversight was glaring, like a team skipping fortifications in a siege. The barricade's value wasn't theoretical, it saved lives when the sun rose. Taylor's suggestion, born of instinct, was a rare moment of clarity in a day of bad calls. The men stacked the debris, their hands shaking from exhaustion, not fear, as the night stretched on. Some still clung to the hope that Custer's 5 troops would appear, rendering their work pointless. Taylor, though, sensed the truth. Custer wasn't coming, and the Sioux and Cheyenne were far from done. By 10 p.m., with the barricade finished, Taylor was assigned guard duty. His Group 6 privates and Corporal Stannis Roy, all from a troop, moved 300 yards down the slope from the defenses, setting 2 sentries at a time. Ahead lay 2 small hills, 50 yards apart, perfect sniper nests for any Sioux or Cheyenne warrior watching for careless troopers. Taylor drew the second watch, giving him 2 hours to rest. Before lying down, he scanned the terrain, memorizing shadows and ridges, like a player mapping a level before a boss fight. Exhausted, he sank into a deep, untroubled sleep, the kind that only comes when your body's too tired to care about the bullets waiting at dawn. 2 hours later, around midnight, a nudge woke him. The first watch reported, "All's well," but Taylor wasn't taking chances. He picked a slightly different spot to sit, avoiding movement that might draw a sniper's eye. From below, the Sioux and Cheyenne camps echoed with shouts, drumbeats, and the wail of mourning. Taylor reflected on the day of unparalleled excitement, fierce combat, and, for the warriors, a stunning triumph. Over 200 white soldiers lay dead, their gear horses, saddles, carbines, revolvers, ammo, even clothes, no spoils of war. But victory came at a cost. In many teepees, a warrior's body lay still, a husband or father who'd ridden out to protect his home. The cries for the fallen were loud, raw, cutting through the night like a live stream of grief. Then, amid the drums and howls, a bugle sounded. The men froze, hearts leaping. Custer was coming, but the call wasn't familiar, not a standard army signal. It came from the enemy camp below, sharp and mocking. Drums pounded harder, wolf howls rose, and Taylor realized a G-Troop bugler must have fallen, his instrument now a trophy for the Sioux or Cheyenne to taunt them. He dismissed wild theories: Indians learning to play bugles overnight or a captured trooper forced to blow. More likely, 1 bugle, maybe 2, not the rumored 8 or 10 from Custer's troops, was being used to sow confusion, like trolls spamming a chat. As Taylor's 2-hour watch ended, the noise faded, leaving only the mournful yips of prairie wolves. Dawn broke around 3 a.m. on the 26th of June, and 2 rifle shots cracked from a low ridge ahead, likely a Sioux signal. A hail of bullets followed, raking the lines. Taylor's guard team scrambled back to the barricade, diving for cover. A troop held the main defensive line, joined by stragglers from other units and a few civilian packers. Taylor spotted an officer from another troop, cowering behind the thickest part of the breastworks, dodging danger while others faced it. From first light to noon, no one dared peek over the barricade. Any movement drew a storm of lead. The Sioux and Cheyenne, positioned on higher ground, kept the pressure relentless, their snipers picking off anyone careless enough to stand. Captain Benteen, despite flack for ignoring Custer's orders, showed steel. His troops held a ridge to the south, a few hundred yards from the main position, with no dug-in cover. The oversight cost them at least 10 wounded, maybe 18, and 3 dead per one account. Benteen, unfazed, walked openly to Captain Moylan's position, bullets zipping past, to request barricade materials. His calm was almost reckless, like a streamer ignoring a kill zone to make a point. Taylor, tasked with hauling supplies to Benteen's line, carried a hardtack box up the ridge. A bullet slammed into it, nearly knocking it from his shoulder, but he reached the position unscathed, heart pounding like a lag spike in a firefight. Returning to a troop, Taylor took a roundabout path to avoid snipers. As he slid behind the barricade, Frankman, a civilian packer next to him, popped up to fire. A bullet struck him between the eyes, dropping him instantly, a painless death. Frankman's reckless shooting had drawn warnings before, but he'd ignored them, firing without aim or effect. Taylor and another trooper dragged the body back, its blank stare too grim a reminder. With his own pistol lost in the retreat, Taylor grabbed Frankman's government-issue sidearm, a practical move for the fight ahead. Life felt fragile, like a health bar blinking red, and most men's sense survival hinged on something divine, not skill. Mid-morning, Benteen rode north to Reno, demanding reinforcements. His southern line, held by H Troop alone, was vulnerable, and he feared a full Sioux assault. The odds were brutal. like a solo queue against a stacked team. Reno, still rattled, offered no clear plan, his red handkerchief a stark contrast to his indecision. The barricade, Taylor's idea, held firm, but the men's morale was as shaky as their defenses. The Sioux and Cheyenne, masters of the terrain, kept the pressure on, their victory over Custer fueling their resolve. Taylor, gripping Frankman's pistol, braced for the next wave, knowing the bluffs were no safe zone. Taylor, one of the few to survive Little Bighorn's slaughter, staggered back to the river, where the steamboat, far west, waited. Bloodied and battered, he joined a handful of survivors hauled aboard, ferried to safety as the Sioux victory echoed. Reno's drunken chaos had sealed their fate, a brutal lesson in hubris. History would argue over Custer, but Taylor's eyes saw the truth. Bad calls, worse odds. Subscribe for more unfiltered history, and comment your take on Reno's failure.